My wife held my hand like she meant it. The machines were loud that night. A beep for my heart, a hiss for my lungs. Somewhere down the hall, a cart with a bad wheel. She leaned close. I could smell her perfume, the one she saved for church and funerals. Finally, she whispered, "It's all mine." Behind her, my stepdaughter's voice, quiet but not quiet enough. "I'm taking his truck. He'd want that." He. Like I was already past tense, like I was a chair being argued over at an estate sale. The door clicked shut behind them. The machines kept their rhythm, and I lay there in that bed with my eyes closed, doing the hardest work I have ever done in my life. Nothing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm Carl Emmert, 71 years old, retired land surveyor, Athens, Alabama, up in Limestone County, where the summers hum and everybody knows whose casserole dish is whose. Widower. That word still sits crooked on me, and Josie has been gone 13 years. The town sees a tall old man in a green pickup, a man who buys the same brand of work gloves every spring, drinks his coffee black at the hitching post on Thursdays, and won't let anybody else touch the rose bed on the south side of his house. That's all they see. I prefer it that way. I started as a rodman on a county survey crew in 1976, 21 years old, holding a rod straight in a bean field for a man who spat tobacco and never said thank you. I learned the work from the ground up, chains and transits, section corners, iron pins driven in 1890 that were still right where the book said they'd be. A surveyor learns one thing early, and he learns it for life. Paper remembers what people forget. A fence can wander. A memory can wander further. But a recorded plat sits in the courthouse basement and waits. 50 years. 100. It doesn't get tired, and it doesn't get talked out of anything. I met Josephine Lang at that same courthouse in 1979. She worked in the records office. I came in for a deed book and came out with a reason to keep coming back. We married that fall. I was 24 and sure of exactly one thing in this world. Her. Our daughter Iris came along in 83. I got my license in 85 and painted my name on a door. Emmert Land Surveying. Josie kept the books at our kitchen table for 30 years, in pencil, because she said ink was for people who never made mistakes. And piece by piece, quiet as taxes, I bought land. Timber parcels along Piney Creek. First 40 acres in 88 when nobody wanted them. Another 40 in 95. The rest by 2005. 160 acres of pine and hardwood and creek rock, bought with money we didn't spend on new trucks. I surveyed every foot of it myself, walked every line. Josie used to sit on the tailgate with a thermos while I set pins, and she'd hold up the old brass pocket compass I gave her our first Christmas and say, "Still pointing at you." That's the thing about a good marriage. It doesn't need an audience. Josie planted the rose bed the spring before she got sick. Ovarian cancer, 2013. It took 11 months, and it took them politely, which somehow made it worse. The last thing she told me wasn't about love. We'd said all that already. She said, "Carl, mind the paper." So I did. In 2014, I sat down with a lawyer named Lenore Bratton, a small woman with reading glasses and no patience for nonsense, and we minded the paper. But I'm getting ahead of myself again. That part comes later. 5 years alone taught me how loud a house can be. The ice maker, the clock, the recliner nobody sat in. Then came Deanna. Church pancake breakfast, 2018. She laughed at something I said, and I hadn't heard a woman laugh at something I said in a long time. She was 51, widowed once herself, quick with names, the kind of woman who remembers your grandkid's birthday and says it first. She made the house loud in a better way, for a while. We married in 2019, small ceremony. Her daughter Tara stood on one side, chewing gum through the vows. I noticed. I decided not to notice. A man can do that for years. The cooling came slow, the way a creek drops in August. You don't see it fall. You just look up one day and the rocks are showing. First it was Josie's photographs. They migrated. Hallway to guest room to attic. "It's just clutter, Carl," Deanna said, folding the word clutter around 34 years of my life. She's been gone a long time. I carried the boxes up myself. I told myself it was a kindness to the living. Then it was Iris. My daughter would call the house phone and get Deanna, and the messages got shorter on their way to me, and then they stopped having a way to me at all. Iris started calling myself from Chattanooga and saying, "Careful as a woman stepping over ice. Dad, I don't think she likes us much." "She's just protective," I said. Silence on the line. My daughter was kinder to me than I was being to her. At Deanna's card nights, I was a prop. "Carl made his little maps for 40 years, she'd say, and the ladies would smile, and I'd refill the iced tea. Little maps. I once reestablished a section corner that settled a lawsuit between two counties. But I refilled the iced tea. Christmas of 2024, in front of guests, I told a story about Josie's pecan pie, and Deanna corrected me before the punchline. "Nobody wants the old wife stories, honey." She smiled when she said it. Her people laughed. I looked down the table at the empty chair where nobody was sitting and had the strange thought that the chair and I had a lot in common. The recliner went in the spring, Josie's recliner, the one with the worn left arm where her book hand rested. I came home from the diner and it was gone to the church sale. Deanna said, "You never sit in it." No, I never sat in it. You don't sit in a church pew on a Tuesday either, but you don't sell it. I said nothing. I went out and pruned the roses. My 70th birthday, they threw me a party I didn't ask for. And I stood in my own backyard while Deanna gave a toast about taking care of our Carl in his golden years. Golden years. I'd re-roofed the shed that spring, but I smiled because you do. Afterward, carrying folding chairs to the garage, I passed the kitchen window and heard Tara inside, not whispering, because why would she whisper in a house she was already dividing? When the time comes, the land alone has to be worth, what, $1 million? 2? And Deanna, easy as reading a grocery list. The time comes when it comes, baby. Patience. I stood there in the dark holding 4 folding chairs. Now a smarter man might have opened that window and settled it right then. I've asked myself plenty of nights why I didn't. Here's the honest answer. Part of me still wanted to be wrong. You can know a thing cold in your head and still leave one window open in your chest, hoping the draft proves you a fool. And there was something else, something quieter. I knew what the paper said. I'd known since 2014. A man who knows where the true corner is doesn't argue with every fence. He lets the neighbors talk. The pin is the pin. So I carried the chairs in, and I came back inside, and I ate a slice of my own birthday cake standing at the counter while they planned their patience. You weren't waiting on an inheritance, Deanna. You were living inside one. It just wasn't ever going to be yours. Tara came around on first Sundays and holidays, and when she hugged me, her eyes were always somewhere else, usually on the truck. A '69 Ford I restored with Josie, riding shotgun to every swap meet in 3 states. Tara called it the Classic. She'd say, "You still driving the Classic?" The way you'd check on a savings bond. Small cuts. That's all they were. No single one of them worth a fight. That's the thing about small cuts. You don't bleed out. You just get used to bleeding. And me? I watched. I remembered. And I said nothing because I had made a promise to a woman in a hospital bed once. And the promise wasn't about roses. Mind the paper. March 12th of this year, I was out at the rose bed with a bag of soil when the ground came up sideways. Pain like a hot wire through my middle. I remember the smell of dirt. I remember Mateo shouting. Mateo Salazar has tended the yards on our road for 20 years. He helped Josie plant those roses, and after she passed, he kept showing up, and we never discussed it. Some men talk, some men show up. He got me in his truck and ran 2 stop signs, and I don't remember the emergency room. A perforated ulcer, they told me later. My own stomach had been quietly cutting a door in itself for months, and everything spilled where it shouldn't, and sepsis moved in fast the way it does in a man my age. I remember pieces, lights sliding by overhead, somebody counting to 3 before they lifted me, cold in my arm, then the long gray. They kept me sedated those first days while the antibiotics fought it out. And here is what nobody in that hospital said out loud, because nobody thinks to say it. Sedation is a tide. It goes out. It comes back. There are hours where a man lies still as a stone and hears every word in the room, clear as church bells, and cannot so much as flutter an eyelid to tell you so. They never check the water. The night of March 14th, the tide was out. I heard the door first, then two sets of footsteps and the particular silence of people arranging their faces. Then a voice I'd learned belonged to Dr. Voigt, the palliative doctor, just outside my cracked door, talking low to my wife. Sepsis. Organ strain. A man of my age. She was kind about it, professional, and I will not fault her for a word of it. Realistically, you should prepare. Days, 3, maybe 4. 3 days, maybe 4. You'd think a man hearing his own death sentence secondhand would feel fear. What I felt was stranger than that. I felt like the rod man again, holding still, holding straight, while somebody else took the measurement. Then the footsteps came to my bed. Deanna took my hand. Her rings were cold, and my wife of 7 years, who I had watched pack my first wife into an attic one photograph at a time, held my hand like she meant it, leaned down through that hospital smell to get to my ear, and whispered like a girl telling a secret at a slumber party. Finally, it's all mine. She patted my knuckles, twice. The way you'd pat a dog that had been, all things considered, pretty good. From over by the window, Tara. I'm taking his truck. He'd want that. A pause and then, softer, to her mother. What's the land worth? Everything's worth something, Deanna said. After. The door clicked. The cart with the bad wheel went by. And I lay in the dark with my heart machine beeping steady, and I want to be honest with you about what happened inside me, because it wasn't rage. Rage is loud. This was quiet. It was the sound of a door I had been holding open for 7 years, finally swinging shut, and the click it made was so small and so final that I almost thanked her. Benefit of the doubt is a crop. You plant it and plant it. That night I let the field go. 3 days, she'd said. Fine. I decided to use them. Morning came thin and blue through the blinds. The tide was further out. My head was clearer than it had been in days, which is a private joke between God and dying men. A nurse named Patrice Gilmore came in to check my lines. Big, careful hands. Eyes that had seen every kind of family walk through that door. Well, look who's with us, she said. Ma'am, I said. My voice was gravel in a bucket. You need anything, Mr. Emmert? My phone. She looked at me a long second. Nurses know things. They stand in hallways all shift, and hallways are where the truth goes to stretch its legs. She didn't say a word about anything. She just found my phone in the drawer, plugged it in to charge a minute, and set it in my hand. You rest, Mr. Emmert, she said, and on her way out she left the door open exactly as wide as I nodded at. I made one call, not to my daughter, not yet. If I called Iris first, I'd have cried, and I didn't have the fluids to spare. I called Mateo. He picked up on the first ring the way he does. I could hear a mower shut off. Mateo, it's Carl. Quiet, then rough. You sound terrible, Jefe. I've been better. Listen, in my shop, top of the tool chest, there's a green field book, canvas cover. Bring it to me. Don't tell anybody. Not anybody. The green book, he said. And? I looked at the ceiling. Somewhere in the house I built my life in, my wife was measuring what my life was worth. And nothing. Just that. And you're quiet. You've had my quiet 20 years, Mateo said. It comes with the mowing. That afternoon he stood at my bedside in his work boots, holding the green book like it might hatch. My old field book from the last job I ever ran. And tucked in the back cover, where I'd put it in 2014, a business card. Lenore Bratton, attorney at law, wills, trusts, estates. You see, after Josie passed, I did what she told me to do. I minded the paper. Lenore Bratton and I sat in her little office on the square for the better part of a month, and we built a thing called the Josephine Emmert Living Trust. Named for my wife, because the money was half hers and all her good sense. Into it went the house on Cotton Row, the 160 acres on Piney Creek. The proceeds when I sold the firm to Randall Pugh, my old crew chief, Every pin and every plat of 40 years, retitled, recorded, filed. Iris was named successor trustee. Iris held my medical say-so too, the healthcare proxy, signed and witnessed while the casseroles from Josie's funeral were still coming back empty. That was a year before I ever ate a pancake next to Deanna Krebs. And in 2019, 2 weeks before the wedding, Lenore slid a prenuptial agreement across her desk and said, in front of Deanna and her nephew the notary, "This just keeps everything tidy." Deanna signed it in under 4 minutes. She was warm those days, or I was lonesome enough to grade on a curve, and she wrote her name with a little flourish and said, "Who wants to talk about money at a time like this?" She never read past the second page. I know because the second page is where Josie's trust is named, and in 7 years my wife never once asked me a single question about it. You weren't married to a rich man, Deanna. You were married to a groundskeeper for a dead woman's estate. If you'd ever asked, I might have even told you. Lenore came the next evening wearing her church face and carrying a casserole, which I believe was the first dishonest thing that woman ever did. She set it down, pulled the chair close, and looked at me over the reading glasses. "Mateo says you've decided to live. Doctor gave me 3 days. I'm on day 2 and feeling contrary." "Good." She opened a folder on her knee. "Then let's talk about what we don't do." That's Lenore. 40 years of estate law, and her first move is always the brake, not the gas. We don't confront. We don't accuse. We don't move $1 in a way a judge could squint at. A man who's just been given days and suddenly starts signing things looks influenced. You sign nothing in this bed, not a birthday card. "She's going to bring me papers," I said. "I'd bet the back 40 on it." "Then your hand shakes," Lenore said. "You're an old sick man." She looked at me, and behind the glasses there was something older than law school. "You were my friend's husband before you were my client, Carl. I sat behind you two at church for 11 years. Let the paper do the talking. You filed it in 2014. It's been waiting patiently ever since." Paper remembers what people forget. "And Carl," she said, gathering her coat, "I'm sorry for what Mateo told me you heard." "Don't be sorry," I said. It's the first honest thing she's said to me in years. That night I slept without the machines minding me much. A man sleeps better sedated by purpose than by medicine. Deanna came the next morning in her good coat, smelling like the funeral perfume, carrying a folder from the office supply store. She'd been crying, or she'd done the things crying does to a face. She held my hand again. I let her. You'd be surprised what a man can let happen to a hand once he's decided it's just a hand. "Honey," she said, "the doctors say you need total rest. So I talked to a notary, and there's a simple little paper, power of attorney, so I can manage the bills. So you don't worry about one single thing." There it was, folder number 1. I made my hand tremble like an aspen and let my mouth go slack. "Can't," I mumbled. "Shaky today, Dee." Her jaw set, just a hair, just a heartbeat, and if I hadn't spent 40 years reading hairline differences between where a fence was and where a fence should be, I'd have missed it. "Of course, honey, tomorrow." Tomorrow came and folder number 2 came with it, and my hand, wouldn't you know, was worse. She left it on the tray table with a pen on top. Optimism. I'll give her that. That night I lay there looking at that folder in the half-dark, and I'll tell you the temptation, because a story like this is worthless if the man in it pretends he's marble. The temptation was to sit up, to feel her jump, to say the whisper back to her, word for word, in her own voice, and watch 7 years of performance fall off her face in one drop. I wrote that little play in my head a dozen times, and it felt good every time, the way scratching poison ivy feels good. Then I heard Josie, not a ghost, just 34 years of her, filed where I keep them. We were standing at the rosebed in that memory, and she had the pruning shears, and she was taking a long, healthy-looking cane down to a nub. "That one's suckering," she said. "It looks fine, and it feeds on the whole bush. You don't argue with it, Carl. You cut it clean, and you let the roots decide what grows. Cut it clean. Let the roots decide." The folder sat there with its pen on top until morning, when I asked Patrice to set it on the windowsill, where it got a nice view and signed nothing, same as me. Between her visits, my body was doing something the paperwork hadn't planned on. Living. Dr. Okonkwo, the ICU man, came in on the 18th with my chart and the first unguarded face I'd seen on a doctor in a week. "Mr. Emmert, your numbers have turned. White count's down. Lactate's clearing. Somebody down there likes you." "Somebody down here's contrary," I said. He laughed and moved me out of the woods on paper, and I lay there doing quiet arithmetic. 3 days, she'd whispered, on a Saturday. It was Wednesday. I had outlived my own estate sale, and on the 19th, Mateo texted me a photograph. He'd been edging the front walk, invisible the way working men are invisible to certain people, and the photo showed a silver SUV in my driveway and a man in a golf shirt at my front door with a leather folder and a laser measure on his belt. Under it, Mateo wrote, "Realtor, second visit. Tomorrow they walk the whole house, 10 o'clock. She told him you were not going to be a problem." I read that in my hospital bed with the pen still sitting on folder number 2. Not going to be a problem. Everybody in my life was counting my days that week. So was I. I was counting them the way a surveyor counts from a known point, with the arrival already fixed. Because Dr. Okonkwo had let one more thing slip that morning, and I'd asked Patrice to keep it our secret, and she'd smiled like Christmas and said discharge paperwork was nobody's business but mine. They were coming to measure my house at 10 o'clock on the 20th. I was coming home at 9:45. There was one call left to make, and I'd been saving it the way you saved the last of the coffee. Iris picked up on the second ring. Chattanooga is 2 hours away, and my daughter had been calling that hospital twice a day and getting Deanna's version of me, which I later learned was, "Resting, no visitors, I'll keep you posted, sweetie." Sweetie. My girl is 43 years old, and my wife had her parked behind a velvet rope. "Dad," she said, and her voice broke on one letter. "Hey, Iris. I'll keep most of that call for myself, if you don't mind. Some things aren't for the internet, but I'll tell you the end of it. I need you here Friday morning," I said. 9 o'clock. Bring nothing but yourself and don't call the house." "Dad, what's going on?" "Friday," I said. "And Iris, when you see me, I'm going to look like 40 miles of bad road. Don't you dare cry until after." She laughed. It came out half a sob, but it came out. Josie used to laugh like that at exactly the wrong moments in church. "Yes, sir," she said. Friday morning, March 20th, Patrice wheeled me down herself. Hospital rule, the wheelchair. She bent down at the curb while Iris brought the car around, and she straightened my collar like I was going somewhere important. And she said, quiet, just for me, "You go on home now, Mr. Emmert." Everything I needed to know about what that woman had heard in that hallway was in how hard she was not saying it. "Thank you, Patrice, for the phone." "What phone?" she said and winked, and went back inside to the beeping. Iris drove. Lenore followed in her sedan. My daughter had done her crying in the parking garage like I asked, and now her chin was set in a way I recognized from her mother, and her hands were at 10 and 2. "You're sure about this?" she said. Not a question, a rail to hold. I've never been more sure of anything I've enjoyed less. Athens rolled by the window. The square, the hitching post, Thursday crowd inside, no idea. The water tower, a town where I know the property line of every man who ever waved at me. We turned onto Cotton Row at 9:44. The silver SUV sat in my driveway. Behind it, a stager's van, back doors open, moving blankets and a rolled rug leaning out. Tara's little red car at the curb. And on the porch, my neighbor Norma Teal, pretending to water a fern she'd watered that morning, because Norma misses nothing on our street, and God bless her for it. The front door stood open. You want to know what that does to a man. Not the whisper, not the folders. The open door. Your own front door standing open like the house had already changed hands, and a stranger's voice inside saying, 14.5 by 16. Good bones in here. Iris parked. I got out slow, the way I had to, one hand on the door frame. No wheelchair now. A man walks into his own house. Norma Teal saw me first. Her watering can just stopped, mid-pour, water running onto the porch boards. I put a finger to my lips. Norma nodded the way deacons nod. The parlor smelled like somebody else's candle. The realtor, golf shirt, laser measure, was sighting along Josie's parlor wall. A young woman with a clipboard was writing declutter personal items on a printed sheet, And past them, in the kitchen doorway with paint chips fanned in her hand like a poker hand, my wife, talking to Tara about countertops. Quartz, Deanna was saying. Buyers want quartz. Then Tara saw me, and her face did something I will remember the rest of my days. It didn't show guilt. It showed inconvenience. Mom, she said. Deanna turned. The paint chips stopped moving. I have seen a lot of silence in my life. Deer stand silence. Courthouse basement silence. The silence after the backhoe shuts off and everybody looks in the trench. This was new. This was the silence of a person watching arithmetic fail. 3 days, maybe 4, and here stood day 6, sunburned nowhere but alive everywhere, in his own parlor, with his daughter on one side and a small woman in reading glasses on the other. Carl, Deanna said. Her voice found its footing fast. I'll credit her that. Honey, you're home early. This is just an appraisal for insurance. We were going to surprise you. You did, I said. The realtor's measure clicked off. Smart man. Chad Dunmore, he said, to nobody, in the way of a man establishing later that he was just doing his job, which, to be fair, he was. Mr. Dunmore, I said, you'll want to sit down for this part. You too, Tara. You've been standing on my rug this whole time. Might as well use a chair. We gathered at Josie's kitchen table, because that is where paper gets read in my family. Deanna sat across from me, spine straight, working out which version of which story fit through which door. The stager stood in the hall not knowing whether she was allowed to leave. Norma Teal had drifted just inside the front door, holding her watering can like a candle at a vigil. Lenore set her folder on the table and took out 2 documents, and she did it the way she does everything, without hurry, without mercy, without raising her voice. Mr. Dunmore, she said, before your client signs a listing agreement, you'll want to review the title on this property. My client, Chad said and stopped. Lenore slid the first document across. Warranty deed, recorded April of 2014. This house, its outbuildings, and the adjoining 160 acres on Piney Creek were conveyed into the Josephine Emmert Living Trust 12 years ago. Carl Emmert, trustee. Iris Fields, successor trustee. Mrs. Emmert here holds no title interest. She never has. Chad Dunmore read it. Realtors read deeds fast. He looked up at Deanna, and his face was the face of a man doing the professional version of backing slowly out of a room. The second document, Lenore said, is a prenuptial agreement executed June of 2019 in my office, wherein each party waived claim to the other's separate property. Separate property is defined in the schedule on page 2. She turned the page around, patient as a schoolteacher. Page 2, Mrs. Emmert. I've always wondered if you ever got to page 2. Nobody said anything. The refrigerator hummed. Josie's kitchen clock, the one shaped like a rooster that Deanna called tacky and never managed to take down, ticked on the wall. Carl, Deanna said, softer now. New approach, coming in on a different bearing. Honey, you're tired. You've been through something terrible, and you're confused, and we'll talk when the house is empty. And there it was. One last little cut, offered from habit. Confused. I stood up, slow. I'm 71 and I'd been septic 5 days ago, and I wanted to be standing for this, and I stood. You measured my wife's house, I said, while my bed was still warm. Quartz counter silence. I was sedated, Deanna, not gone. There's a difference, and the difference is the whole rest of your life. I kept my voice at porch level. I'd promised myself that in the hospital. Porch level, no higher. The doctor told you 3 days, and you held my hand, and you leaned down close, and you know what you said. Her face went through 3 stories in 4 seconds and didn't pick one. I'll not repeat it in front of these people, I said. That's a mercy, and I'd note it's the last of a long line of them you never counted. Tara found her voice first. Wrong one, but she found it. This is insane. He's punishing us for grieving early. Grieving early. I want you to sit with that phrase the way I had to. Iris made a sound low in her throat, and I put my hand on my daughter's shoulder, and she stilled. Josie's trick. Hand on the shoulder, let the paper talk. Nobody's being punished, Lenore said, mild as milk. Punishment would look very different. What's happening here is simpler. Nothing is changing hands today because nothing was ever going to. The house isn't Mrs. Emmert's to list, the land isn't hers to price, and the truck out back is titled to the trust as well. It was Josephine's. Tara blinked. It's a truck. It was a wife's, I said. You never asked whose. Chad Dunmore gathered his laser measure and his leather folder, shook nobody's hand, and left a business card on the table out of pure muscle memory. The stager followed him out. Norma Teal stepped back onto the porch and began, very slowly, to water the same fern for the third time. And then it was family, whatever that word had left in it. I sat back down because my legs had done their part. Deanna hadn't cried yet. She was still working the problem, and I watched her arrive at the last door there was and open it. 7 years, Carl. Now the tears came, right on schedule. I cooked for you. I sat in that hospital every day. Whatever you think you heard, that was fear talking. Grief. You don't know what it's like to think you're losing everything. You're right, I said. I heard fear. I just had 13 years of practice telling fear from inventory. I took the checkbook out of my jacket. I'd had Lenore walk me through the arithmetic twice, because mercy should be exact. The prenup says you leave this marriage with what you brought in. Lenore tells me that's the law and the whole of the law. I wrote while I talked. Slow. My hand really did shake now, and I let it. This is more than that. It's enough for a clean start somewhere, first and last month, and a good bit of runway. You'll find I dated it today. My hand's steady enough when I mean something. I slid it across Josie's table. 90 days to find your footing. I'll sleep at Iris's till you're settled elsewhere, because I won't make a woman pack under my roof beam while I watch. The divorce will be quiet. What I heard in that room stays between you, me, and God, and I'd think hard about which of the three of us you owe the explanation. She looked at the check. She looked a long time. You planned all this from a hospital bed, she said. Not sorry, impressed almost. It was the truest look she ever gave me. No, I said. Josie planned it from one. I just kept the file. She took the check. That told me the last thing I needed to know, and it told Tara something too, because Tara looked at her mother reaching for that paper, and for 1 second looked like a girl watching a magic trick from the wrong side. They were gone by April. The divorce went the way paper goes when it's in order, which is to say, quietly. No courtroom scene, no speeches. Her lawyer read page 2 and recommended the check. The apology never came. I want to be square with you about that, because the movies promise you a scene the world mostly doesn't deliver. No letter, no knock at the door in the rain. In June, a text came about a crock pot she'd left, and Mateo set it on the porch rail, and that was the sum of 7 years. For a while, I left the porch light on out of habit. One night in May, I looked at it, and I turned it off, and I stood in the dark and felt nothing but the floor holding me up, which it turns out is a kind of peace. No shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatic ending, just a door, closed kindly, and left that way. Spring did what spring does. Iris and Sadie started coming up 2 weekends a month, and then most weekends, like water finding an old channel. My granddaughter is 9, gap-toothed, and asks more questions per gallon of lemonade than any surveyor I ever trained. The rose bed had gone leggy during my hospital month. Mateo and I took it down to the roots and rebuilt it, new soil, 3 new bushes, the old ones pruned hard the way Josie taught us both. We didn't talk much while we did it. Some men talk, some men show up. When we finished, I handed him an envelope, and he wiped his hands twice before he'd take it. Inside was a deed. The caretaker cottage at the edge of the Piney Creek land, the one he'd been half living in during storm seasons for years anyway, titled to Mateo Salazar, recorded at the courthouse where I met my wife. He read it standing up. Then he sat down on the cottage steps, which I have never once seen that man do in daylight, in 20 years. Jefe, he said, I can't. You already did, I said. 20 years of quiet and 2 stop signs. You'll never pay rent again, and Josie would have called that overdue. He looked out at the pines. She used to sneak me tomatoes over the fence, he said. Tell me they were extras. They were never extras. No, I said. They never were. The Thursday after that, I walked into the hitching post at my regular time, and here is what happened. Nothing. Dot poured my coffee black without asking. The feed store boys argued about rain. Somebody's grandson had made varsity. Nobody looked at me sideways. Nobody lowered their voice. And I sat in my booth and realized the whole town had heard some version of it by then, Norma Teal being Norma Teal, and the town had decided, in its quiet Alabama way, that it wasn't going to be a thing. That's a gift people don't put on lists, being unremarkable to people who've known you 50 years. I'd nearly had it priced and sold out from under me. Iris came up the following weekend, and we spread the trust papers across Josie's table, the same table, because I wanted my daughter to see everything with her own eyes, while my own eyes were still around to watch her read. She went through it page by page, pencil in hand, her mother's daughter to the bone. Dad, she said somewhere around the timber appraisal, why didn't you ever tell her? 7 years. She'd have behaved if she'd known there was nothing in it for her. I thought about it. I'd had the same question from my own ceiling at 3 a.m. Because behaving isn't the same as loving, I said, and I'd rather know which one I had. Iris put the pencil down. She came around the table and hugged my neck the way she did when she was 6, and neither of us said anything for a while, and the rooster clock ticked, and that was the conversation. In June, I took Sadie out to the 160. We walked a boundary line together, her holding the brush back, me telling her what an iron pin is and why a man drives one. At the corner marker, I took out Josie's brass pocket compass, the one from our first Christmas, and I put it in her 2 hands. Does it always know where north is, Grandpa? It does if you hold it still. She held it still. 9 years old, holding her grandmother's north, steady as a fence post. I had to look at the pines a minute. That's the thing about what people leave you. The ones who loved you leave you instruments. The ones who didn't leave you lessons. A man needs both, but he only needs to carry one. Late June, a padded envelope came from the hospital. No note, just Patrice's looping hand on the label. Inside was the little paper wristband they'd cut off me at discharge. Emmert Carl, she'd kept it. On the back, in ballpoint, she'd written 4 words. Told you, go home. I put it in the green field book, back cover, next to where Lenore's card used to live. Some paper you file, some paper you keep. 4th of July, we had a fish fry down at the creek. Iris and Cody, Sadie with her feet in the water, Mateo and his grandkids, Lenore in a lawn chair with sweet tea, still wearing the reading glasses, Norma Teal supervising the hush puppies like they owed her money. Patrice Gilmore drove out from the hospital on her day off because I'd asked, and because some debts you pay in catfish. Nobody measured anything. Nobody priced anything. The truck sat up by the gate with both doors open so the radio could reach us. And at dusk, Sadie fell asleep against my arm mid-sentence, the compass still in her fist. 71 years old. Slept in a hospital bed in March, listening to my life get divided. Slept on a creek bank in July, holding all of it that ever mattered. These nights I sleep with the window open. The house is quiet and somehow fuller. I still say goodnight to Josie. Lately it sounds less like grief and more like gratitude. If you've ever loved someone who only loved what you had, if you've ever lain still while somebody counted you out, if you've ever had to learn the difference between being wanted and being useful, then this story was for you. And you already know the ending is not about the money. It never was. It's about a man finding out, 3 days at a time, exactly who was holding his hand. If it meant something to you tonight, share it with someone who may need to hear it, and tell me in the comments, would you have kept your eyes closed? I read everyone. Thanks for spending this time with me. And remember, no matter your age, choose peace over pride, truth over comfort, and the kind of love that asks for nothing back.